Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Italian Politician of the Week. I am Ipernik, the greatest silent, and today we're talking about Marco Pannella, father and founder of the Radical Party and one of the most revolutionary political personalities in our history. Time is tight and I had the bright idea to make this video in 2 languages instead of 1, as I usually do, so sadly I will have to wrap stuff up, be more selective in the things I talk about. In this video, I will provide an overview of Pannella's political career, his battles for civil rights, his ideology, and overall legacy. Without further ado, let's begin. Pannella was born in 1930 in Teramo from a relatively well-off family. He studied law in Urbino and was an activist in the Italian Liberal Party in his youth until he founded the Radical Party with some of his colleagues. Now, the Liberal Party back in the First Republic was the party of the entrepreneur class. The best way I can describe their ideology is with the term classical liberalism, but to our modern standards they probably fit just as nicely under the label of neoliberalism. Due to their generally small voter base, the PLI was never particularly successful at the polls, getting around 3% of the votes every time, and they aligned with the interests of the elite. Pannella was wealthy, sure, but his ideas were radically liberal, libertarian even, and therefore left the liberals in 1955 to found the Partito Radicale, which still exists to this day. Now, the Radical Party was more than just a party. It was a transnational organization with the aim of increasing and establishing the civil rights and freedoms of individuals throughout the planet. The Italian branch ran for elections until 1989, when they decided to abandon political ways to fight only through protests and strikes. Pannella's first stride to fame was in the late 60s and early 70s, when he fought for the implementation of the divorce law, as well as for other causes such as rights of abortions in 1998, legalization of light and hard drugs, and freedom to protest regardless of the state of emergency. He was also among the main activists for the referendum which sought to abolish the public financing of parties, and a strong advocate against corruption and the rotten parts of the institutions and political establishment. Pannella would use many alternative methods to get his point across whenever a referendum was deemed unconstitutional or when the parliament refused to acknowledge one of their law proposals. Other than the usual hunger and thirst strikes, Pannella would rant on his party radio where he talked about his ideas, and he would make a scene whenever he was invited on TV. Best case scenario, he would just sit on a chair holding a sign while biting onto a rag for 20 minutes. Or if he felt a bit wacky, he would bring a pound of weed on set and give it to the host as a present. Now, some of you might judge his methods as a bit too erratic and perhaps even too crazy, but hey, they worked. Italy at the time was ruled by a 5-party coalition that had been there for almost 40 years, and for a very long time Pannella and his men were the only ones interested in challenging the taboos in our society, particularly on the concept of the good costumes, and to actually grant recognition and rights to the poor, to the homeless, to the sexual and ethnic minorities, and to whoever was and is discriminated for things that may not be under his or her control. Pannella surrounded himself with all kinds of people, starting with Ilona Starler, porn star and singer of Hungarian descent who got herself elected into parliament in 1987 and fought against the stigmas of the time on the porn industry, as well as who worked in it and their target audience. Another person worth mentioning is Emma Bonino, human rights activist who has dedicated her life to women's rights, particularly on the topic of abortion. She was seen as Pannella's second in command back in the day, and she will later be Minister of Foreign affairs from 2013 to 2014. She currently runs the party. Another person worth mentioning is Enzo Tortora, a TV personality who hosted a show where he auctioned things sent by his audience to then send the profits to charity. His story is also quite unique because he was framed for murder by a mafia leader who was toying with the police, and since a lot of journalists did not like Tortora, when the news hit that he was suspected for these crimes, the media went crazy and gave for granted that he was guilty, dragging his name to the ground. Tortora will later be found innocent in the mid-80s, but only when he was elected in the European Parliament and had the chance to expose the Italian justice system that cared more about making justice entertaining rather than protecting the innocent. I am looking at you, Di Pietro. Anyway, this sound means that I made a video on this person before, while this one means I haven't. So if you want to find out more about these people, check out the description or comment down below. After the whole mess with Tangentopoli, the Second Republic came to be, and Pannella aligned himself with the left coalition against Berlusconi. He still defended him in some respects, like his economic policy, and on some matters regarding justice, like when he called for impeachment of President Scalfaro. But overall, Pannella seemed more interested in international matters, specifically peace, freedom and amnesty in the Third World and elsewhere, specifically Tibet for some reason. His methods never really changed, and he kept doing strikes after strike until his questions were answered and his demands satisfied. Even between 2014 and 2016, when his health was deteriorating rapidly until his passing. His last real hunger strike was in 2014, and it was about living conditions in prison. It will be interrupted by Pope Francis himself, and they became friends afterwards. Today, Pannella is remembered as one of the bravest and more iconic Italian politicians. He was the beacon of progress in this nation, and despite his occasional incoherence on certain matters, he remains one of the best freedom fighters in our very recent history. So, what do you think of Pannella? Do you agree with his methods and stances? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, that's it. Goodbye.